This episode was sponsored by the Geopolitical Insight and Education Foundation. Want to find out more? Check the link in our show notes.
Welcome to another episode of Legal for Tech, the podcast. So guys, you do recognize my voice. It's always Rosie here. And as I've said many times, this is just a group of students and young professionals who are very interested in anything that has to do with technology. And yes, it's regulation. So today I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Giacomo Di Gregorio. Great to see you, Giacomo. Hello.
Great to see you as well. Very happy to be here today.
Super happy because we're talking with two guests, and that's not very usual here on the pod. So a big round of applause to our guests. I'm going to go with the women first, of course. Monika Namysłowska, which, yeah, I will call you Monika the whole time. Great to see you, Monika. Welcome on the podcast.
Thank you.
And then I'm also joined, and now the gentlemen enter the room, by Kasper Drazewski. Hello, Kasper.
Hello, thank you very much for the invite.
Great to see you both. So you've been collaborating on a big project that we're going to talk about today. But before that, I'm going to ask Monika to start with a short introduction of her career and why she's here. And then I will ask Kasper to directly dive into his own experience and the recollection of his story, basically.
right.
Thank you. Well, I am a full professor at the University of Lodz in Poland, and I'm also a member of the European Commission Consumer Policy Advisory Group and also of the European Commission's expert group against SLAPP. I am member of the expert advisory group of the OECD Global Forum on Consumer Protection, and I'm also I also serve on the Codification Commission in Poland, Codification Commission of Civil Law at the Ministry of Justice.
All right. Well, I don't have such a beautiful straightforward CV. I've been wearing many hats over the years. I've been a lawyer turned academic turned digital activist for a few years, now turned academic again. I work at KU Leuven at the Center for IT and IP Law. We just call it CETIP. And I joined 2 years ago after 2 years after almost 6 years of working in Brussels as an academic liaison with BEUC, the European Consumer Organization, on matters of digital fairness on a program dedicated to diagnosing what are the areas where consumer law is no longer up to the challenge and what needs to be done to fix that situation, to remedy that situation. And that's where I met Monika.
And so, guys, now that you've told us a bit more about your career, your life, kind of parkour until now, let's call it a parkour. I want to ask, what's the meaning of this project? What brought you to this point? How did you come up with it, and why is it so relevant? And I'm going to ask Monika to start.
Well, I'm a consumer lawyer, and for a long time, a very offline one. My PhD was on misleading and comparative advertising, and so, well, it was the classic question: what company is allowed to say us about itself and about the competitors, and when does it cross the line? And well, then in 2005 came the UCPD, the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. It is still the backbone of EU protection against consumer protection against unfair trading. And 2 years later, and it's also important, 2 years later came the first iPhone. And with the iPhone, it was the start of a never-ending series of challenges for consumer law. And so step by step, year by year, I ended up running a project, a grant on AI and consumer law. But the real turning point was in 2022. Professor Hans Miklitz, who's a very important consumer law scholar, and he actually more or less built the EU consumer law and as a discipline, and is now building the digital consumer law. He invited me into a project on digital fairness. And this was a project financed by BEUC. And BEUC is also where I first met Kasper.
I love this. Absolutely. It's just that where I first met the person, it really reminds me of How I Met Your Mother. So this is the best podcast we can ever record. Kasper, let's start with the place where you met Monika, and that's a reference to Friends, of course. Let's go with your way of seeing this project. Talk about the significance of it from your perspective.
Yes, exactly. Well, it was interesting because it happened right after I had just nearly completed my first postdoctoral stint at the European University Institute, also co-supervised by Professor Hans Miklitz, who flagged to me that since I'm interested in the disempowerment of individuals, during that time of the postdoctoral position, we were working together on Claudette. You may have heard of this. It was the first European AI system to help consumers identify unfair contract terms and unlawful privacy practices. And that was a very interesting time, but let's see if we have more. Let's see how we do. I don't want to spend too much time here for now. Hans told me that there was something really interesting starting in Brussels. BEUC, the European Consumer Organization, was co-funding a research and advocacy project dedicated to building a research team, bringing Europe's finest academics from the fields of consumer law, private law, and more general, data scientists, etc., and to create research to dive into what has been changing in the modern society and how it interacts in the digital market. Where are the points where does the system still work? Is it still fit for purpose, or do we need something more? And that project was that initiative, because there was more than one project over the years at BEUC. That was something that has earned itself a place in history. I'm not ashamed to say that, because that's where the term digital fairness was coined. That's where the Digital Fairness Act was first conceptualized, also by Professor Miklitz. And that's where, last but not least, that's where also our collaboration started with Monika, as said.
And now let's enter the main topic of our discussion, let's say, which is the never-ending scrolling as a technological phenomenon that challenges the EU legal framework. Can you tell us what is it and what characterizes its impact upon EU law? Maybe Kasper, you can start with this.
All right. We coined this term to describe how people interact with digital services, because it is very rarely the old school contract situation where you agree to something, you pay this and that amount of money, and you get something in return. What happens instead is you're placed in an environment. Very often you don't pay for being there, but you are in an environment algorithmically driven. This environment is meant to steer your choices, steer your interaction. This is the first example that comes to mind, of course, are recommender systems like we have in social media. There are also more examples, like take the interfaces of airline companies and how they drive your choice. But let's stick to social media because that's the easiest example. Socials monetize your engagement. So on the surface, it looks pretty cool. You get the service, you don't pay anything. But you are interacting with an environment that is its sole purpose is to keep you engaged, to steer that engagement, to boost that engagement. And that environment is constantly moving. It's always rebuilding itself around you. So every given state only exists for a second or even less. So if you're a consumer and if you're looking at this from a consumer perspective and you feel that things are getting weird and you would like to see whether you could actually challenge what's going on around you, but the moment is gone. How do you go back? How do you get evidence? How do you prove what happened? Like, you don't know yourself. Maybe it wasn't there. You don't know when or what it was. It's impossible. If you want to exercise your rights as a consumer, it's impossible. And this is where the legal difficulty really begins.
Exactly, because traditionally, consumer law loves moments, well, like the moment before the contract, the moment of the transactional decision, the moment of consent, the moment of cancellation. But the scroll doesn't give you this moment. It's continuous, so the user doesn't make one clear decision. The consumer stays and scrolls a bit more, and the system learns a bit more. The feed adapts, more content appears, and the consumer stays again. And this is why we think EU consumer law is still looking for unfairness in the wrong place. It's looking for one distorted decision when the distortion is really in the architecture of the entire process. And Kasper mentioned the difficulty to even complain. If you want to complain, you will be asked what happened and when. And how do you respond if you just wanted to check your friends' vacation pictures and you somehow spend your entire Saturday scrolling TikTok?
Monika, great points. Absolutely, from every possible perspective. I love how you explained the concept of algorithmic structure as opposed to the simple one pinpointed decision that is manipulative. Absolutely, super interesting. And we do look at it from the perspective of the user, let's say the person that's scrolling, the teenager potentially. But this is an issue that's widespread to the whole of society. And it brings very kind of tangible effects upon society as well as upon the individual. And you said a very important word, Monika, and I'm going to kind of come back to you in asking you to answer to this question, which is the regulation right now tackles the wrong type of fairness. What kind of regulatory safeguards would you see most suitable to the problem of algorithmic structure as opposed to that of single manipulation?
Mm-hmm. Um, um, well, the question we have to ask is actually about the fitness of rules we already have. And well, the honest answer to the question, well, consumer law is is it fit for purpose? Partly yes, partly no. Why? Because we do have tools, and for example, the scroll can be looked at as an unfair commercial practice under the UCPD, under the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And then we have the DSA, the Digital Fairness Act, for example, dark patterns and some, well, aspects of recommender systems. And then we have the Artificial Intelligence Act that prohibits some, well, practices. But those acts, they were built for a different shape of problems. The UCPD reacts after the fact, ex post. So once you can point to a specific practice, to a specific harm, well, the problem is that digital practices and digital processes, they need the opposite. They need ex-ante prohibitions, so before the harm happens. And our current unfairness test still leans on the average consumer model, so on a reasonably attentive person making a decision. But there is no average consumer in the digital environment. There is no single decision, and we just have feed optimize against you over time. So, well, yes, we do need more regulation, and we need regulation with a new paradigm and a new vocabulary. But even if we agree on the principle that we now have processes, digital processes, and how do we know it's happening? How can we prove it? Kasper.
Indeed, you're pointing to, I can sense that you're pointing to the asymmetry, the knowledge asymmetry, which is one of the pillars of the concept of digital asymmetry as it was coined in the digital fairness research. There is the problem, as it was already mentioned, goes beyond that. It's one thing to know what's going on, and very often we don't. There have been so many papers published on what people actually understand out of disclosures that they are supposed to read, even if they do read them.
What we don't understand.
And what they don't understand that they don't understand. This is absolutely crazy, because when I was working on Claudette, I was doing the legal team, we was annotating terms of service contracts to teach the model to give it training data on how to look for unfairness, what are the types of unfairness, and it was already quite visible back then that consumers were being pushed into a corner with all those disclosures. They were asked to agree to something that they had no way of understanding. We didn't understand it. We were lawyers, PhDs, mostly PhDs at the time, because that was the composition of the team, and we spent months discussing what those disclosures about sharing data with trusted the data that may be shared with trusted marketing partners, what that could actually mean if you try to translate this into the conceptual base of the GDPR. So consumers were being asked to agree to that, and that was considered the basis of protection. Information, disclosure, agreement, consent, thank you. Back to business as usual. And the failure the increasingly obvious failure of this model in the digital environment was exactly what prompted the digital fairness work in the first place. That this paradigm was failing. It was clear that there is no understanding that that can be achieved based on just flooding a person with tons of information, and increasing the volume of information does not increase the knowledge. Information does not necessarily create knowledge, and very often it does not. So this is one side of the problem, the inability to actually find out what's going on in this triangle between the consumer, the enforcer, and the trader. There's only one party, that's the trader, who knows what exactly is happening. Now, there is also a structural problem, and it ties to the problem being systemic. These are not, when we talk about harms, these are not singular high high profile harms that can be pointed to a concrete infringement. These are thousands of micro infringements that are happening day in, day out. Some say this is a death by 1,000 cuts. Basically, you never know. There's no single one that tips the threshold that actually gets you to litigate, because the ones that you can identify, you can name, are very small, are very minor. You're a busy person. You have a life to live, hopefully. And so you will not pursue this. And the surveys we did at BEUC with European consumers confirmed it. They also had a very low. Consumers also expressed that they had a very low confidence in actually achieving something with litigation. The chance of success they saw is extremely small. And when you think about it, you have a systemic issue that is underlying the entire functioning of the digital society. And whoever still had doubts, probably lost them during the COVID years, when we accepted with open arms digital intermediation in all those areas of our lives. So these services are there. They're here to stay. We've gotten used to them, and at the same time, whenever something is wrong, it's on you to as the consumer, to pinpoint what happened. It's the burden of proof is on you. The burden of supplying information. What happened? When did it happen? Uh, it's on you, and you have no way of finding this out. What do we tell people? Do we ask them to take screenshots just to be on the safe side? Screenshots every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds. How often is often enough? Do you record their interactions with AI models? It's just it's maybe. There is no, as long as we're sticking to this traditional private law model, that the party raising a claim has to provide proof to justify it. Consumers are lost in the digital world. This is why Monika spoke about the need for ex-ante protection. We shouldn't only be protecting against harm that has already happened. We should be also trying to reduce the risk of such harm ever occurring. And if in your mind this connects with very model of unfair commercial practices law, which actually looks for unfairness in practices that are likely to create certain problematic outcomes, not just ones that do create them, you can probably conclude that this is very much in the spirit of unfair commercial practices law, in the spirit of the oldest traditions of consumer law, to prevent harm before it can occur, to look for likelihood of harm, to look for the capacity to deal harm. I'm really
Okay, but
saying, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Kasper, but we shouldn't forget about the blacklist. We actually do have ex-ante prohibitions in the UCPD. Well, soon 47 prohibitions, but still, out of 47 per se prohibitions, ex-ante prohibitions, I think only four concern digital environments. We do need more. Sorry for interrupting.
That was a great point, Kasper. I absolutely agree with everything you said, like literally everything.
I'm so glad.
Um, no, no, because the legal structure, I mean, private law works if you have an issue arising between parties every once in a while, like, contract law, for example, contracts between people. I'm thinking of a sales contract. They work on a daily basis for millions of transactions per day, and then the one that goes wrong, you have private law. Like, the percentage of private law claims that arise of wrong transactions is minimal, considering the amount of transactions that happen on a daily basis. And then the issue with things like the infinite scrolling is that basically every single interaction is a failure to uphold consumer law in the right way. So the proportion is just, it doesn't work before private law. If you think about it, it's counterintuitive, and I absolutely love your point of, yes, we should prevent it from happening, because um it's not feasible to enforce it through private law instrument. That the concept of caveat emptor, buyer beware, cannot work in this case. It just simply doesn't work. So yeah, thank you for that. I think also some courts, around Europe maybe should listen to this podcast, because it's not just the system that doesn't work, it's also the court that enforces the system, which is a whole other podcast, I'm told. I'll leave it to
True.
Giacomo.
Could I very quickly interject on a point? You raised a very important point that every micro interaction is potentially uh, the seat of unfairness, so to speak. And the commission tried to address that in the guidance, in the updated guidance to the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, which was released in December 21, as a commission notice. So those of you who work with competition law will probably draw parallels to the commission notices in competition, which here unfortunately doesn't hold the same power, because this is just this guidance is non-binding, but it nonetheless provides very important insights on how the commission recommends that the law is applied. And in regard to uh, and in regard to transactional decisions made while interacting with a digital system, the guidance says that there is transactional decisions are also those micro moments where you just decide to stay on the website, to where you click, where you scroll through content. All of those are transactional decisions. And all of us consumer advocates at the time were really excited about this, because it was, wow, fine. The commission recognizes that these are also transactions. People are being monetized. They're spending their time, their attention. They also pay with what happens later to their health. All of those things that to prevent, and then and so this is a transaction, and it's finally getting recognized. And in that spirit, you may have seen the ruling of on TikTok in the French Scar case in Italy, that by the Autorità Garante, which applied exactly that reasoning. And unfortunately, it's the only regulator in Europe that I've seen so far to go this way, to be that courageous to do this. The So that was absolutely amazing. But then being academics, we're being paid to ask the difficult questions. And if you want to coin this into a standard and every click is a transactional decision, where do you stop? What level of granularity do we need? Is every click a decision? Is every touch of your mouse a decision? Every millisecond when you're tensing up the muscles of your index finger to move the wheel, is it dependent on what your eyes are doing at the moment? It is extremely easy to come up with examples that will harm the universal value, the universal applicability of this understanding. This is what got us thinking about the never-ending scroll in the first place. Because instead of looking continuously zooming in and looking at ever smaller moments so that we can have our transactional decisions and continue to happily apply our UCPD, um, we decided we should zoom out. There is at some point looking for those tiny microscopic moments becomes futile. You have to zoom out. You have to look at the whole process, the flow, the trajectory of the interaction. And this is where Monika came up with the term of an unfair commercial process instead of
Yes,
just
but what we also need is, well, there is a second side of the story, because we need to zoom out when we look at harm, because well, the UCPD only applies when we have economic harm. And if you spend your entire Saturday scrolling on TikTok, then, well, is it economic harm or is it addiction? And if we don't have economic harm, what regulation to apply?
That's a very fair point. I have an excellent student in our advanced master's program who gave me a very convincing argumentation line on how every harm that can lead to um, estimable expenditures or lost revenue can be considered economic harm. And it's great that such argument can be made, but I agree with you, Monika. This is not, we shouldn't be continuously stretching the optic we have in the UCPD to make it per forza applicable to the new reality. The UCPD, the mechanisms we have in the UCPD about the probability test for looking for the potential to cause to mislead consumers, they date back to the United States case law of the 1920s. It is they were adopted in Europe all these years later, and they still were very much up to the task. But then digitalization came, social media arrived, monetization of interactions began, and the world changed.
But well, this is not only a theoretical question, because, well, last month I had a presentation in San Francisco and about digital fairness, and
How did that go?
and there was a student, and well, she asked a question, or, well, it was a comment actually, and she said, well, I'm a student, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a law student, uh, and well, my generation, we are addicted to scrolling to our iPhones, etc. And what can you do for us? Please do something. So, yeah, there is
Yeah,
a lot to do.
No, that's an important point because you
yeah,
shouldn't
beautiful.
regulate. Sorry,
No,
sorry, I
you
interrupted
you
you.
please.
No, I was just gonna say that you shouldn't be you shouldn't regulate, you shouldn't forbid people to enjoy them from block them from enjoying themselves. That's not the point. We're, but that shouldn't stop us from looking at what is happening underneath and which psychological mechanisms are being weaponized against people's well-being in the longer term. That's my point.
I think there's a problem, and then I would leave it to Jack. I think there's a problem also in terms of conceptualizing specific services, because sometimes I view digital services as being kind of like an exception, a type of wonderful, amazing news that we all share, that is not viewed, the concept, the way this business works is not viewed in the perspective of all the other businesses in the economy. And AI is the best example of this kind of um, wonderization, I would call it. The issue is that the state already regulates, law already regulates other things that, from a certain perspective, from a certain group of people, are viewed as the best thing they have, and from the perspective of society, cause a huge economic damage. And I agree with you both when you both say, okay, we cannot stretch the boundaries of law, because law has to be certain, and the point of certainty is also that you know exactly where it ends. But that doesn't mean that in the view of our legal framework, the idea that you can prevent people from spending the whole of their lives on social media and not working is something that the law cannot do. It is something that the law has done in the past. It is something that is completely acceptable from a legal perspective. That can happen in other cases. The law does kind of worry and does preoccupy itself with having a strong economy, having a strong population, not having a population that continues to die with cancer, for example. That's the point of regulating the use of cigarettes, for example. And I think sometimes we need to see digital services, not that I'm saying digital services are like cigarettes, but I'm saying if the law can do it, why are we so prudent towards the use of law that is good, that is beneficial to the whole of society, when we have schemes that allow for it? I'm just saying it is no wonder. It is nothing different from any other products or any other services we already have in our economy. So, yeah. Anyways, let's go back to our questions. Jack, please go for it.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting to listen to this part. But switching from a regulatory point of view to a non-regulatory point of view, let's say, do you think like could non-legal instruments be better adapted to tackle the negative effects of feed scrolling on platforms and social media platforms? What do you think about that? And also, shouldn't users be allowed to behave as they please? And we already mentioned this a little bit, even if that behavior is considered detrimental. Maybe I think you have a good flow, Casper. You can start with this question.
Thanks. I think we should clarify one thing. Non-legal instruments are mainly codes of conduct and other forms of self-regulation. And I could give you, in the context that we're discussing here today, I could give you a very long answer or a very short one. And I think let's try with a short one, which is actually a quote from Sam Levine, who was director of the Federal Trade Commission Consumer Office, where he commented on an attempt by the Commission to leave room for industry self-regulation in respect of consumer privacy. The FTC in 2002 stated that it is, quote unquote, clear that the industry will continue to make privacy a priority for consumers. And on that basis, the state did not intervene. 20, 20 years later, Levine went on record saying that, and I quote, "In my view, this was a serious error." He said, "It is now apparent that industry did not actually make privacy a priority. In fact, at the same time the FTC was expressing confidence in self-regulation, Google began exploring how it could mine search queries for behavioral insights on its users." So, enough said. This quote to me covers it extremely well. There are areas which simply should not be left unregulated because they invite pursuit of individual benefits, short-term benefits by the strongest actors. And this is not what we want to happen here.
Okay, but if self-regulation is a failure in digital sector, should law regulate our pleasure? And this is a big question, and it's one of the oldest questions in law about law. What a state is for, and what actually keeps the society together, holds the society together, and well, this is a very difficult question, and I have to simplify my answer. And the law, the it does not protect you as from our choices. And if you want to lose a Saturday to a feed, that's yours to lose, and you are allowed to enjoy things, to waste time. But there's something different, and it's the design behind the feed. For example, the ranking that decides what you see next. The A/B tests run on millions of users, and then the personalization till to the point where you usually stop. And so that isn't actually your choice to spend the entire Saturday on scrolling TikTok. And this is, well, that's a company shaping your choice using data and testing you will never see to make stopping harder than it would otherwise be.
Netflix made a quite disturbing film about the engagement steering by the ad tech industry at the time. The film was called The Social Dilemma.
Yes.
It largely went unnoticed by the larger population. When I heard people dismissing it as science fiction, many didn't notice it was actually a documentary. Uh, mm, I gave it to my kids to watch a few weeks ago, and it's from a few years back, but it's still really good. So
Very relevant.
and for anyone of you listeners, if you haven't watched The Social Dilemma and you're interested in these topics, it's worth it.
Mhm.
Great point. Actually, I think from our generation, and I'm referring to Jack and I here, we grew up with a social dilemma, and I know that many of the people that are interested in our topics have got, let's say, passionate about this specific side of law because they've watched the social dilemma, us included, me included at least. I'm calling Jack in. I know that there was a memory of that documentary. It was it really a time shifting type of documentary. So thank you for mentioning it. And I'm kind of exploiting the chance of going in with a new question, which is basically kind of like to wrap up what we've been talking about so far. Let's kind of summarize the points in the use of let's say digital technology that in your opinion have not been regulated well or yet within the European system. And we've heard many points throughout this conversation. I'm going to ask Monika to go first in kind of reshaping what we've been talking about so far and giving it a final and maybe a bit prescriptive kind of cloak to end our
Mhm.
conversation.
Thank you. We we have the DSA, we have the AI Act, but they aren't really consumer instruments. So they regulate the practices in a targeted way, point by point, a bit here, a bit there. And what we actually need, we need a change of a paradigm. And something like the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, and something like it does for the offline world. With a general standard of unfairness, of digital unfairness, and well, as I said before, with a new vocabulary also, and not only unfair commercial practices, but also unfair digital processes. And we are expecting the Digital Fairness Act. It's expected in Q4 this year, and the DFA is supposed to be the answer. But we still don't know what it will look like. And so far, the announcements of the commissions are that it will that we will have new targeted rules on dark patterns, unfair personalization, addictive design, misleading influencer marketing, and the protection of minors. And they are all welcome. But a list of banned practices, it's not the same as a change of paradigm. And if it stays a list, the scroll as a whole, as a process, it will keep slipping between the items on it.
Yeah,
Kasper?
it's what we call that Beuk, not seeing the forest for the trees. It is but this is a very common and recurring issue in regulating horizontal matters that require a principle-based approach to be future-proof, to last longer than just until the next great idea comes out and suddenly we're going to wake up that we don't have a provision in the legislation that covers it, just as it was with the AI Act, which is very much regulating use cases. And the silent hero of this interview is Professor Hans Miklitz. He had this fantastic saying that when you're regulating use cases, you're regulating the past. And this was he was proven right in a very in a very visible way when the AI Act had to go back to the drawing board because ChatGPT came out, and suddenly it turned out that we hadn't been paying attention to what was already brewing in the technology world. What I'm saying is that it's an easy way out to identify specific points of intervention. There are risks. There are risks to there are addictive effects. Okay, let's have a provision on that. There's problem with content removal. Let's put that in the DSA. But if we cannot really afford to keep regulating like that. And if the new Digital Fairness Act continues down the same road, and for instance fails to notice that apart from individual selected discrete transactional moments, there is also sometimes the whole process that needs to be screened for unfairness. It will be outdated the moment it comes out. And then Monica and I and many people like us will be advocating for the DFA 2.0 because the asymmetries will continue to grow. Traders have always been stronger than consumers. You mentioned the contestation rate of contracts. When a trader faces a consumer, they have a specific time window to understand what's going on and to make their choices. The trader, it's for the trader, it has always been their livelihood to optimize that engagement with the consumer. The trader is always stronger, knows more, can do more. But this asymmetry has grown exponentially in the digital world and the digital market and will continue to grow. We're already seeing this with AI and and also with explainability of Gen AI models. So this is why we're asking for a systemic solution. We may not get it just yet, but it's very much needed.
But one last sentence about our silent hero of this interview and the DFA, because Hans Mitic is also, well, he coined this term DFA,
He
Digital
almost
Fairness
gave a heart
Act.
attack to a few of my colleagues at BEUC, actually, because this was during I think this was the first annual digital consumer event with representatives of DG Justice, and Hans was giving, I think it was a keynote. My memory fails me, but I think it was either that event or our workshop just before that. In any case, he gave a fantastic speech as always, and then a fiery one. I still have the transcript somewhere, and then he concluded, "We need a Digital Fairness Act," and that had been the moment of extreme regulatory fatigue. We have just seen a chain of proposals from the Commission for all these digital acts, and people were pulling their hair out. How are we going to adapt to a regulatory environment that is changing so quickly? And then we, as consumer advocates, we were actually instructed not to mention more legislation because that might turn people off. And then Hans boldly steps up and says, "We need a Digital Fairness Act." And it was a perfect moment. 2 weeks later, we heard that the term had caught on with the commission and was actually being used, and this became the emblem of the whole initiative. It would be really sad to see it being weakened in the way that we're discussing, but maybe this will mean that we will need another update when the political situation becomes more favorable. Who knows? Let's hope for the best.
One quick last question. We looked at the past, but what about the future? What are the aspects that concern you the most about the future technology? Maybe Monica, you can start.
Well, I'm not worried about technologies we don't know yet. I'm actually most worried about generative AI, and it's because what it does to us, and I do worry about what it does to knowledge, to education, and to our shared memory as society. Because once everything each of us reads is generated and tuned to us personally, we lose our common reference point and the sense we are all looking at the same world, and there's already a growing body of research on what these tools do to our attention, to our memory, and our capacity to reason. And it's the first evidence telling us to take this seriously now. And also for us as lawyers, also depends on a shared world and shared values and content. Well, and we don't know true content or false content generated separately for each of us does pull that apart.
It's true, but who knows? Maybe humanity will be reunited again once we all use the same AI model for everything.
Huh.
We will be united by technology. Who knows?
That's a beautiful thought, Kasper. Yeah. Well, one model, one truth, and humanity finally unite.
You mentioned Gen AI. There are things to worry about. I remember every now and then there's a new bit of information about how human-like Gen AI can appear sometimes. There have been experiments conducted for ever since Gen AI first became headline news. But something that I found really interesting was a recent paper by Anthropic on that has identified the 171 distinct emotional states of the model, and each of them functionally affects the model's outputs. So we have we have created a human-like assistant for ourselves, and now maybe we shouldn't be surprised that it also has emotions.
Well, but
That's
171
right.
moods. Well, so so the machine now has more moods than I do.
I was going to say that the machine, we have the evidence that artificial intelligence is a woman, because I do not think that my boyfriend has 171 expressions. If he listens to the podcast, he's going to be very happy about this. But I think he can probably figure out 3 of mine. So, 171 is definitely too much.
And that's only the first paper I've seen on this. I'm sure
Mm.
and the models keep growing. I'm really curious to see what's going on. What we will find out tomorrow. One more interesting direction to keep an eye on. There's an interesting research direction towards AI-induced psychosis. This time in humans. We're talking about psychosis in humans, not AI. So
Yet.
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 So this is one of the directions that we will also be taking our research. And by the way, shameless plug, if any of you or you listeners plan to be in Nijmegen in the Netherlands at the end of October, there will be a symposium dedicated to AI-induced psychosis. And if you plan on attending, you'll meet us there.
Okay, our listeners will find all the information about the symposium in the show notes to this podcast. Yes. Thank you so much, both of you. I loved your kind of comments also on generative AI, because I think Digital Fairness Act, the AI Act, the DSA, sometimes miss out on the real core of AI technology. And as you said, the AI Act, Kasper, I think it was you. The AI Act famously misses out on the rise of chatbots. So we will see what happens. Maybe we will also need I don't know, an AI Fairness Act in a bit of time, and no more simplification, I guess. Thank you very much, both of you, Monika Namysłowska and Kasper Drazewski. It was such a pleasure for both of us to talk to you. And you're always welcome on this podcast whenever you want to continue your collaboration and tell us more about all the phenomena that are impairing consumers rather than enabling them, I would say. Thank you so much, both of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you, and
Thank
welcome back.
you. We count on it. You're
Definitely.
always invited.
All right. Thank you.
This was all for Legal for Tech, the podcast.
This episode was brought to you in partnership with DG Beetle. DG Beetle helps privacy professionals to stay up to date with the most important European documents in the AI, data and digital space every day. Curious to know more? Check out the link in our show notes.